There's a moment in every struggling marriage when a man realizes something terrifying. The harder he tries to hold on, the faster she slips away. He increases his effort. More flowers, more attention, more words of affirmation, more attempts to prove his love. And with each desperate gesture, he watches her respect drain from her eyes like water through his fingers. This is the paradox that destroys modern marriages. The moment you believe you cannot lose her is the moment you already have. Most men enter marriage with a fundamental misunderstanding about power. They think commitment means surrender. They think love means need. They believe that saying "I do" means handing over the keys to their masculine frame and accepting a new role. The devoted, selfless husband who places her needs above everything, including his own self-respect. Society reinforces this lie. Movies, songs, social media, all of it programs men to believe that the ultimate expression of love is total sacrifice. Lose yourself. Become what she needs. Mold yourself into her perfect partner. But here's what no one tells you. She doesn't want you to do that. Not deep down. Not in the parts of her psychology that actually drive attraction and respect. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche understood something profound about human relationships that most marriage counselors will never admit. He wrote extensively about power dynamics, and his conclusions were uncomfortable. Marriage is not an escape from the will to power. It is an arena where power expresses itself most intimately. Nietzsche saw that love itself contains an inherent antagonism. He described it as nature's eternal struggle, the attempt of two separate beings to maintain their individuality while merging into partnership. And in that struggle, power determines everything. When you need her approval to feel valuable, you've already lost. When you require her validation to feel like a man, she stops seeing you as one. When you cannot imagine life without her, you become invisible to the very person you're clinging to. This isn't cruelty. It's not manipulation. It's not even conscious on her part. It's biology meeting philosophy in the battlefield of modern marriage. The question you must ask yourself is this: are you willing to lose her to keep yourself? Because the answer to that question determines whether your marriage survives with mutual respect or dies slowly through quiet contempt. Most men are terrified of this question. They avoid it. They suppress it. They tell themselves that a good husband never considers such thoughts. But avoidance doesn't change the reality playing out in bedrooms across the world. Marriages where love persists but respect has vanished, leaving behind emotional deserts where intimacy once lived. The willingness to walk away is not a threat. It is a declaration of self-respect. And respect, not love, not commitment, not shared history, is the foundation upon which attraction is built and maintained. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore why this paradox exists, what happens to men who lose their frame in marriage, and how reclaiming your willingness to lose her might be the only thing that saves your relationship. But first, you need to understand how you lost your power in the first place. Because most men don't lose it in a single moment. They lose it gradually, day by day, compromise by compromise, until they wake up one morning and realize they've become strangers to themselves. It doesn't happen overnight. No man walks down the aisle planning to lose himself. No groom stands at the altar thinking, "Today, I'll begin the process of surrendering my identity, my standards, and my self-respect." Yet it happens, again and again, to good men, strong men, men who once commanded respect in every other area of their lives. The erosion is so gradual, you don't notice until it's almost complete. Let's talk about frame. Not in the abstract motivational speaker sense, but in the cold, psychological reality of what it actually means. Your frame is your reality. It's the lens through which you interpret the world. It's your standards, your boundaries, your values, and your willingness to enforce them regardless of external pressure. When you have strong frame, you operate from a center of gravity that exists within yourself, not in someone else's approval. In psychological terms, frame is about locus of control. Do you determine your emotional state? Or does she? Do your principles guide your decisions? Or does her mood? When conflict arises, whose reality prevails? In the beginning, you had frame. You had to. That's what attracted her in the first place. You made decisions without apologizing. You had plans that didn't revolve around her schedule. You said no without guilt. You had other priorities, your career, your friends, your purpose. She orbited your life. Your life didn't orbit her. And she found that intoxicating. But then something shifted. Marriage introduced a new narrative. Partnership, compromise, becoming one. And somewhere in that transition, compromise became capitulation. Partnership became her leadership. Becoming one meant you disappeared while she remained. Here's the mechanism of erosion. It starts with small tests. She suggests you skip the gym to spend time with her. She expresses discomfort with your closest friend. She makes a comment about how much time you spend on your hobbies. She wants to know why you didn't text back immediately. These are fitness tests, psychological assessments women run, often subconsciously, to determine if you're still the man they chose. They're checking if your frame is solid or if it can be bent, shaped, manipulated. The wrong response is explaining, justifying, or immediately changing your behavior to ease her discomfort. The right response is maintaining your standards with calm certainty. Most married men fail these tests, not because they're weak, but because they've been conditioned to believe that a good husband prioritizes her feelings above his own integrity. So he skips the gym, distances from his friend, abandons his hobbies, responds to every text within minutes. And with each capitulation, her respect diminishes. Not because she's cruel, not because she doesn't love him, but because something ancient in her psychology just received confirmation. This man can be controlled. This man has no center. This man needs my approval to feel valid. And biology has no respect for men who can be controlled. Evolutionary psychology offers uncomfortable insights here. Throughout human history, women have been biologically wired to select for genetic fitness and resource stability. But there's a third element that's less discussed: the capacity for independence and strength. A man who could be easily dominated by his mate would likely be dominated by other men, by circumstances, by the harsh realities of survival. Female attraction isn't politically correct. It doesn't care about fairness or equality. It responds to demonstrations of strength, autonomy, and outcome independence, the very qualities that signal a man can protect, provide, and maintain status in hierarchical social structures. When you lose your frame, you lose these signals. The irony is devastating. The more you sacrifice to prove your love, the less lovable you become. The more you prioritize her happiness over your principles, the less happy she is with you. She doesn't want a man she can control. She wants a man she can't. This is the truth hiding beneath the surface of every dead bedroom, every sexless marriage, every relationship where affection has been replaced by contempt. She may not articulate it. She may not even consciously understand it, but her body understands. Her attraction mechanisms understand, and they respond accordingly by shutting down. You become the roommate, the provider, the emotional support system, everything except the man who makes her feel that primal pull of desire. Look around. You'll see them everywhere. Married men who've been domesticated, men who ask permission, men who apologize for having needs, men who've learned to read her mood before they dare speak, men who've become so conflict-averse that they've surrendered their voice entirely. These men wonder why intimacy has vanished. They can't understand why she's always irritated with them. They're confused about how they became the target of her contempt when all they did was love her. But they're asking the wrong question. The question isn't what they did. The question is what they stopped being. And here's what makes this even more brutal. Once you lose frame, try to reclaim it through the same behaviors that lost, it only accelerates the decline. Begging for respect guarantees you'll never receive it. Demanding intimacy from a position of weakness ensures it will never return. So what's the answer? It's not in doing more for her. It's not in trying harder to please her. It's not in becoming an even better version of the domesticated man you've become. The answer lies in something that will terrify you. But first, you need to understand the difference between love and respect, because most men think they're the same thing. They're not. And that distinction is about to change everything you thought you knew about your marriage. Here's something that will shake your understanding of marriage to its core. Your wife can love you and have zero respect for you at the same time. In fact, this is the exact state of millions of marriages right now. She loves you. She'd be devastated if you died. She wants the marriage to work. She values your presence in her children's lives. But she doesn't respect you. And without respect, love becomes a prison for both of you. Let me be brutally clear about what this looks like in practice. Respect in a relationship manifests as admiration. It's the look in her eyes when you make a decision and stand by it. It's the tone in her voice when she speaks about you to her friends. It's the way she defers to your judgment in your areas of expertise. It's the physical attraction that makes her want to be close to you. Love without respect looks different. It's obligation. It's maternal affection. It's the kind of feeling you have for someone who depends on you but can't challenge you. It's how she loves her children, with nurturing care but zero sexual attraction. When a woman loses respect for her husband, the relationship doesn't end. It transforms into something else entirely. She becomes the functional adult. He becomes the additional child. She manages him the way she manages the household, with patience, occasional frustration, and growing resentment. This is why you can do everything right according to modern relationship advice and still watch your marriage die. You communicate. You're emotionally available. You help with housework. You're sensitive to her needs. You've read the books. You've gone to therapy. You've become the enlightened modern husband. And she's less attracted to you than ever. The psychology here is uncomfortable but undeniable. Attachment theory helps explain this dynamic. There are 4 attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. In healthy relationships, both partners maintain relatively secure attachment. They can be intimate without losing their sense of self, and they can be independent without abandoning the relationship. But here's what happens in many marriages. The man shifts from secure attachment to anxious attachment. He becomes hyper-focused on her emotional state. He monitors her mood constantly. He adjusts his behavior based on her approval. He needs reassurance. He fears abandonment. An anxious attachment in a man triggers something primal in female psychology: disgust. Not conscious disgust. Not, I hate this person disgust, but the subtle, biological turning away that happens when someone displays what evolutionary psychology would call low mate value signals. Think about it from a biological perspective. Throughout human evolutionary history, anxious, approval-seeking behavior in males correlated with lower social status. High-status males didn't need to monitor the moods of others or adjust themselves constantly for approval. They had options. They had confidence. They had outcome independence. Women evolved attraction mechanisms that respond to these signals. It's not a choice. It's not fair. It's not politically correct. But it's real. When you become the anxious husband who needs her validation, something in her neurobiology registers this as a threat to her genetic investment. She may love you the same way she loves family members who need her care. But the part of her brain that drives sexual attraction and respect, that part shuts down. This is why nice guy behavior doesn't create attraction. It creates resentment. The nice guy does everything for her, but with a covert contract. If I do all these things, you'll desire me, respect me, and never leave me. When she doesn't hold up her end of this unspoken contract, a contract she never agreed to, he feels betrayed. And she feels manipulated because subconsciously she understands that his niceness wasn't authentic generosity. It was a strategy to control her feelings. Real respect comes from authentic strength, not performed servitude. Here's the distinction that changes everything. A man who operates from strength does things for his wife because he chooses to, from a place of abundance, not because he needs something in return. He maintains his standards. He has boundaries. He can say no. He has a life and purpose beyond the relationship. And from that foundation of self-respect, he gives freely. A man who operates from weakness does things for his wife because he's terrified of losing her approval. He has no boundaries. He can't say no without guilt. His entire identity is wrapped up in the relationship. And from that foundation of need, Everything he gives comes with invisible strings attached. She can sense the difference. Maybe not consciously, but every woman knows the feeling of being around a man who has self-respect versus a man who's lost himself. One makes her feel safe, challenged, attracted. The other makes her feel burdened, responsible, turned off. Let's talk about what respect actually enables in a marriage. When a woman respects her husband, she trusts his decisions. She supports his vision. She feels safe enough to be feminine, vulnerable, receptive. She doesn't need to be the dominant force because she trusts that he's handling his role. Sexual attraction flows naturally from this dynamic. When a woman doesn't respect her husband, she can't relax. She has to make all the decisions because she doesn't trust his judgment. She has to be the strong one because he's abdicated strength. She has to manage him like a child. And in that role, the role of manager, mother, dominant force, feminine attraction cannot exist. You cannot be both the child and the lover. This is why therapy often fails to save marriages. Traditional couples therapy focuses on communication, compromise, and meeting each other's needs, all of which sounds reasonable. But none of it addresses the fundamental issue: respect. You can communicate perfectly and still have zero attraction. You can compromise endlessly and still feel contempt. You can meet all her stated needs and still watch her pull away. Because what she needs, what her biology craves, isn't more communication. It's a man she can respect. A man who has standards. A man who cannot be controlled. A man who would walk away rather than abandon his self-respect. The cruel irony is that the moment you're willing to lose her is the moment you become worthy of keeping. But why? What is it about indifference, about outcome independence, about the willingness to walk away that creates such a powerful shift? The answer lies in a psychological principle that governs all human desire. And it's about to reframe everything you thought you knew about marriage. Scarcity creates obsession. Abundance creates indifference. And indifference creates desire. This is the psychological principle that governs everything from economics to addiction to human relationships. It's called intermittent reinforcement, and it's the single most powerful force shaping attraction in your marriage. Let me explain. When something is always available, always guaranteed, always there, your brain stops valuing it. This isn't cruelty. It's neuroscience. Your dopamine system evolved to reward pursuit, not possession. The hunt, not the capture. The chase, not the catch. Think about your favorite meal. If you ate it every single day for a year, would you still crave it? Or would it become mundane, expected, something you barely notice? Now apply that same principle to how you show up in your marriage. If you're always available, always seeking her approval, always adjusting yourself to her emotional state, you become the psychological equivalent of that meal she eats every day. Familiar, expected, boring. But here's where it gets deeper. Outcome independence is the antidote. Outcome independence means you don't need a specific result to maintain your internal state. You're not attached to her response. You don't need her validation to feel like a man. You don't require her approval to know your worth. You make decisions based on your principles, not her mood. The Stoic philosophers understood this thousands of years ago. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, wrote extensively about the power of non-attachment. He said that the obstacle is the way, that our struggles don't diminish us, they reveal what we're made of. But only if we remain centered in ourselves, regardless of external outcomes. In marriage, this means you can love her deeply without needing her. You can be committed without being desperate. You can invest in the relationship while maintaining the freedom to walk away if she violates your core boundaries. This is where most men fail catastrophically. They believe that commitment means surrendering outcome independence. They think that marriage requires them to make her happiness their sole mission. They convince themselves that needing her is the same as loving her. It's not. Needing someone is weakness dressed up as devotion. Loving someone from a place of strength means choosing them every day while remaining fully capable of choosing yourself if they betray your values. Let me show you how this plays out neurologically. When you're outcome dependent, when you need her approval, her affection, her validation, you trigger her anxiety. She feels the weight of your need. She senses that your emotional state depends on her behavior. And subconsciously, this creates pressure, burden, responsibility. Women don't want to be responsible for a grown man's emotional stability. They want to surrender into masculine strength, not hold up masculine weakness. But when you're outcome independent, something shifts. You become unpredictable. Sometimes you're available. Sometimes you're focused on your mission. Sometimes you're affectionate. Sometimes you're distant because you're handling your responsibilities. You're not cruel or manipulative. You're simply not orbiting her emotional world. And this unpredictability triggers the very neurological mechanism that creates obsession, intermittent reinforcement. The same principle that makes gambling addictive. The same principle that keeps people hooked on social media. The same principle that drives all pursuit behavior in human psychology. When a reward is guaranteed, the brain stops producing dopamine for it. When a reward is variable, unpredictable, sometimes there and sometimes not, the brain goes into overdrive trying to secure it. This is why the man who's always there, always pursuing, always available becomes invisible. And the man who has boundaries, who has other priorities, who would walk away rather than compromise his standards, becomes magnetic. The man who needs nothing has everything. This is the rule that changes marriages. Not because it's a manipulation tactic, not because you're playing games, but because it reflects a fundamental truth about human psychology. We desire what we cannot fully control. Think about the early days of your relationship. You had your own life, your own friends, your own passions. You weren't always available. She had to work to get your time and attention. And she found that intoxicating, didn't she? What changed? You did. You stopped living like a man with options. You stopped maintaining your frame. You made her the center of your universe and expected her to be grateful. But biology doesn't reward gratitude. It rewards genetic fitness. And a man who has nothing outside his relationship signals low value, not high devotion. Outcome independence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care about something more, your integrity. You care more about being true to yourself than about her temporary approval. You care more about your principles than about avoiding conflict. You care more about living with self-respect than about keeping the peace at any cost. And paradoxically, when you care more about these things than about controlling her response, she starts caring more about keeping you. Because now you're valuable again. Now you're a man with standards, with boundaries, with a life that exists beyond her emotional weather patterns. Now you're outcome independent. And outcome independence is the sexiest quality a married man can possess. But here's the terrifying part. Becoming outcome independent in a marriage where you've lost your frame means going through a transformation that will test everything you think you know about love, commitment, and what it means to be a husband. It means becoming willing to lose her to find yourself. And when you truly embody that willingness, not as a threat, not as a manipulation, but as authentic self-respect, something remarkable happens in the psychology of your marriage. Let me show you what that transformation looks like. Picture this moment. A man wakes up one morning and realizes he's had enough. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but with a cold, crystallizing clarity that changes everything. He's done seeking approval, done explaining himself, done trying to convince his wife to respect him. He makes a decision that terrifies him but also sets him free. He becomes willing to lose her rather than continue losing himself. This is the transformation. And when it happens authentically, not as a manipulation tactic, but as genuine self-reclamation, the entire dynamic of the marriage shifts. Let me show you what this looks like in real time. The behavioral changes are subtle but profound. He stops asking permission for things that are within his domain. He rejoins the gym without negotiating. He reconnects with old friends without guilt. He pursues his career goals without apologizing for the time it requires. He makes decisions and announces them rather than seeking consensus on matters where he has competence and authority. He's not being disrespectful. He's not abandoning his responsibilities. He's simply operating from a different frame, one where his self-respect is non-negotiable. And here's what happens in her psychology: confusion. She's grown accustomed to a certain dynamic. She's used to him adjusting, accommodating, seeking her approval. His entire pattern for years has been one of anxious attachment, monitoring her emotional state, trying to keep her happy, needing her validation. Now suddenly, he's different. He's calm. He's centered. He's outcome independent. When she tests him, and she will, he doesn't engage with fear or defensiveness. He simply maintains his position with quiet certainty. Where were you? At the gym. You didn't tell me you were going. I'm telling you now. No justification. No apology for having needs. No seeking permission to exist as a man with priorities beyond her immediate preferences. This creates anxiety in her. Not because he's being cruel, but because the predictable pattern has changed. Remember intermittent reinforcement? She no longer has guaranteed access to his attention, his time, his emotional availability. He's no longer orbiting her world. And anxiety, in this context, triggers something powerful: reassessment. She starts questioning. Has he changed? Does he still need me? Is he preparing to leave? Have I pushed him too far? These thoughts don't manifest consciously at first. They show up as increased interest in his activities, more questions about his day, more attempts to engage his attention. This is the moment where evolutionary psychology meets relationship dynamics in the most fascinating way. Throughout human history, women who failed to maintain investment from high-value males faced catastrophic consequences: loss of resources, loss of protection, loss of genetic investment in offspring. Female psychology evolved exquisite sensitivity to male withdrawal. When a man demonstrates genuine outcome independence, when he shows through his behavior that he's willing to walk away, it triggers ancient alarm systems in her neurobiology. Not fear in the sense of threat, but fear in the sense of potential loss. And this is where respect begins to return. She starts noticing things she stopped seeing years ago: his confidence, his purpose, his strength, the very qualities that attracted her initially but got buried under years of him trying to prove his worth through submission. But here's the crucial distinction. This only works if it's authentic. If you're faking outcome independence, if you're using withdrawal as a manipulation tactic while secretly hoping she'll chase you, she'll sense it. Women are extraordinarily perceptive to incongruence. Your words might say one thing, but your energy, your micro-expressions, your underlying neediness will betray you. True outcome independence means you've genuinely done the internal work. You've rebuilt your life outside the marriage. You've reconnected with your purpose. You've established boundaries that protect your self-respect. And most importantly, you've made peace with the possibility that she might not come back. This is the terror and the liberation of the transformation. You can't fake being willing to lose her. You have to actually be willing, which means confronting your deepest fear that you might end up alone, that she might call your bluff, that standing up for yourself might cost you the relationship. But here's what most men discover. The moment they genuinely become willing to walk away, they stop needing to. Because the energy shifts. Instead of pursuing her approval, you're living according to your own standards. Instead of reacting to her moods, you're maintaining your frame regardless of her emotional weather. Frame is not about controlling her. It's about controlling yourself. It's about staying connected to your truth without getting pulled into her anxiety, her tests, her attempts to regain control through emotional manipulation. When she expresses anger, you don't become defensive. When she withdraws affection, you don't panic. When she threatens, you don't negotiate away your boundaries. You remain calm, centered, immovable in your self-respect. And this unshakable masculine frame creates the safety she's been craving all along. Because deep down, what she wants isn't a man she can control. She wants a man who cannot be controlled. She wants to feel safe enough to surrender into her feminine energy, knowing that he won't abandon his masculine responsibility. But she can't surrender to weakness. She can't relax into a man who needs her validation to feel stable. She can only feel attraction toward a man who has his own source of strength, his own purpose, his own willingness to walk away rather than compromise his integrity. This is the paradox that saves marriages. The willingness to lose her is what makes her want to be kept. But transformation doesn't happen through theory. It happens through action, through concrete, daily choices that rebuild your masculine frame and reclaim your self-respect. So what does that actually look like? What are the practical steps a man takes when he decides he's willing to lose her to find himself? That's what we need to explore next. Theory is meaningless without action. Understanding why outcome independence works doesn't save your marriage. Becoming outcome independent does. So let's get practical. Let's talk about the concrete steps a man takes when he decides to reclaim his masculine frame and rebuild his self-respect. First, rebuild your life outside the marriage. This is non-negotiable. You cannot be outcome independent if your entire world revolves around her. Return to the gym. Not for her. For you. Physical strength rebuilds mental strength. The discipline of training, the incremental progress, the accountability to yourself. These things restore your masculine identity. Reconnect with your purpose. What were you building before the marriage consumed your identity? Your career ambitions, your business goals, your creative projects. Whatever it was, return to it with intensity. Rebuild your social network. Call the friends you abandoned. Join the communities you left behind. Develop genuine connections with other men who challenge you, support you, and remind you who you are outside of being someone's husband. These aren't activities to make her jealous. These are foundational elements of a masculine life that got sacrificed on the altar of domestic approval seeking. When you have a thriving life outside the marriage, real options, real purpose, real fulfillment, outcome independence stops being a strategy and becomes your natural state. Second, establish and enforce boundaries. A boundary is a line you draw to protect your self-respect. It's not a negotiation. It's not a suggestion. It's a standard you enforce regardless of her response. Example, I will not tolerate disrespect. If you speak to me with contempt, I will remove myself from the conversation. Then you do it. Every time. Without anger. Without explanation. You simply enforce the boundary. Example, Thursday night is for my goals and my development. I'm available other nights, but this time is mine. Then you protect it. No guilt, no apologizing, no seeking permission. Boundaries reveal whether someone respects you. If she consistently violates your boundaries and you consistently fail to enforce them, you're teaching her that your words mean nothing. But here's what happens when you actually enforce boundaries. Initially, she'll test harder. She'll push. She'll express anger or withdrawal to see if you'll fold. Stay calm. Stay centered. Maintain the boundary without defending it. Eventually, one of two things happens. She respects the boundary and adapts, or she continues violating it and you follow through on the consequence, which might be ending the relationship. Third, stop seeking her approval. This is the hardest shift for most men because it requires rewiring years of conditioning. Make decisions in your domain without consulting her. You don't need her permission to join a mastermind group, take a weekend trip with friends, or invest in your professional development. Stop explaining yourself. Where are you going? Out. That's sufficient. You're not a child reporting to a parent. You're a man living his life with transparency, but without justification. Stop monitoring her emotional state for approval signals. Her mood is her responsibility, not yours. You can be supportive without making yourself responsible for her happiness. This doesn't mean you ignore her. It means you stop orbiting her emotional world. You maintain your center regardless of whether she's pleased or displeased with you. Fourth, develop genuine options. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Outcome independence requires actual options. You can't fake abundance. If your only source of value, connection, and intimacy is your wife, you're not outcome independent. You're dependent and pretending otherwise. Develop yourself into a man who has options. Not because you're planning to use them, but because having options changes your energy fundamentally. Work on your career to the point where you're financially independent. Maintain your health and appearance so you remain attractive. Develop your social skills so you're comfortable in any environment. Build your status through achievement and competence. When you genuinely have options, when you know you could survive and thrive without this specific relationship, you stop operating from fear. And when you stop operating from fear, you start operating from strength. Fifth, Address the fear head on. Let's confront what terrifies you most. What if she actually leaves when you set boundaries? What if standing up for yourself costs you the marriage? Here's the liberating truth. If she leaves because you have self-respect, she was never truly yours. Think about it. If the only way to keep her is to abandon your standards, tolerate disrespect, and live without boundaries, what exactly are you keeping? A woman who only values you when you have no value? A relationship where love exists but respect doesn't? That's not a marriage. That's a hostage situation. The fear of loss keeps men trapped in marriages where they're slowly dying. They tolerate contempt because they're terrified of divorce. They accept dead bedrooms because they're afraid of being alone. They live without self-respect because losing her seems worse than losing themselves. But here's what you discover when you genuinely become willing to walk away. Most women don't want you to leave. They want you to be strong enough to consider it. The willingness to lose her, demonstrated through your actions, your boundaries, your outcome independence, signals that you're a man of value. And value is what creates respect. And respect is what revives attraction. A man with nothing to lose cannot be controlled. This is the rule that changes everything. When you've rebuilt your life, established boundaries, stopped seeking approval, developed genuine options, and made peace with the possibility of loss, you become unshakable. Not because you don't care about her, but because you care more about living with integrity than about controlling her response. And ironically, when you stop trying to control her response, you often get the response you always wanted: respect, attraction, renewed investment in the relationship. But not always. Sometimes, reclaiming your frame reveals that the relationship was already over. Sometimes, your willingness to walk away leads to actually walking away. And you need to be prepared for that possibility. Because outcome independence isn't a guarantee of a specific result. It's a commitment to self-respect regardless of the result. So, where does this leave us? What's the ultimate truth about marriage, power, and the paradox that the willingness to lose her makes her want to be kept? We need to go deeper, beyond tactics, beyond strategy, into the philosophical truth that explains why this paradox exists in the first place. Let's go back to the beginning, back to the central paradox that we started with. Why does the willingness to lose her make her respect you more? It's not a trick. It's not manipulation. It's not even really about her at all. It's about the fundamental nature of human freedom and authentic love. Here's the philosophical truth that most people never grasp. Real love can only exist between two free individuals who choose each other daily. Not because they're trapped, not because they're desperate, not because they have no other options, but because they genuinely want to be together today in this moment, despite having the freedom to walk away. When you lose your masculine frame, when you become outcome dependent, when you need her approval to feel valuable, you stop being free. You become a prisoner of her moods, her validation, her emotional state. And a prisoner cannot be respected. A prisoner cannot be desired. A prisoner can only be pitied or resented. This is why all your efforts to prove your love through self-sacrifice backfire so catastrophically. You're not demonstrating love, you're demonstrating bondage. You're showing her that you're trapped, that you have no choice, that you need this relationship to survive. And biology rejects bondage in a mate. Evolution selects for freedom, for strength, for autonomy. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre understood this deeply. He wrote about radical freedom, the idea that humans are condemned to be free, that we carry the weight of our choices without the comfort of predetermined destiny. In relationships, this means something profound. You are choosing this marriage right now, in this moment. Not because you made vows years ago. Not because society expects it. Not because you're afraid of being alone. But because you freely choose it. That choice only has meaning when you could choose otherwise. When you reclaim your willingness to walk away, you're not threatening the relationship. You're making the relationship meaningful for the first time in years. You're transforming it from obligation into choice, from prison into partnership. This is why she respects you when you become outcome independent. Not because you're being cruel, not because fear motivates her, but because you've reminded her and yourself that you're a free man making a free choice to be with her. And that freedom is intoxicating. That freedom is what attraction is built on. That freedom is what respect demands. Think about the early days of your relationship. Neither of you is trapped. Either of you could leave at any moment. That uncertainty, that freedom, that element of choice, it created intensity, didn't it? It created desire. Marriage was supposed to be the ultimate commitment. But somewhere along the way, commitment became imprisonment. You forgot that commitment without freedom is slavery. And slaves are never respected by their masters. The path back to mutual respect begins when you reclaim your freedom. Not freedom from the marriage, freedom within it. The freedom to have standards. The freedom to enforce boundaries. The freedom to choose yourself, when choosing her would mean betraying your integrity. Now here's the deeper truth. This isn't about controlling her response. It's about controlling yourself. You cannot make her respect you. You cannot force attraction. You cannot negotiate desire. These things either exist or they don't, and they exist only in response to genuine value, genuine strength, genuine self-respect. What you can control is whether you live like a man worthy of respect, whether you maintain your standards regardless of her reaction, whether you enforce your boundaries even when it's uncomfortable, whether you remain committed to your purpose even when she tests you. This is masculine responsibility, not the responsibility to make her happy. That's her responsibility. But the responsibility to be a man of integrity, strength, and authentic freedom. When you embrace this responsibility, one of two things happens. She rises to meet you. She respects your boundaries. She adjusts to your renewed masculine frame. The attraction returns. The respect returns. The relationship transforms into something healthy, balanced, and mutually chosen. Or she doesn't. She continues violating your boundaries. She resents your strength. She cannot or will not respect you. And you follow through on your willingness to walk away. Both outcomes represent success. Because success isn't measured by whether the relationship continues. It's measured by whether you maintain your self-respect throughout the process. Let me leave you with this final thought. Your life, your rules, your frame. You didn't come into this world to orbit someone else's emotional reality. You came here with gifts, with purpose, with a mission that extends beyond any single relationship. Marriage should enhance that mission, not destroy it. A wife should be a partner in your journey, not a prison guard preventing you from taking the journey at all. When you reclaim your masculine frame, when you become genuinely outcome independent, when you live with the willingness to lose her rather than lose yourself, you're not abandoning love. You're creating the conditions where authentic love can finally exist. Because love isn't need. Love isn't desperation. Love isn't surrendering yourself to keep someone else. Love is two free people standing in their own power, choosing each other every day because being together enhances who they are individually. That's the paradox. That's the truth. That's the path forward. The moment you're willing to lose everything is the moment you truly have it. Not because losing doesn't hurt, but because a man who cannot be controlled, who will not compromise his integrity, who stands in his authentic freedom, that man is worth keeping. And if she can't see that, if your strength threatens her, if your boundaries trigger her resentment instead of her respect, then she was never yours to begin with. And you're better off discovering that truth than spending decades in a marriage where love exists but respect died long ago. So here's your mission. Become the man you'd respect. Live according to your standards. Enforce your boundaries. Rebuild your life. Pursue your purpose. And let the relationship either rise to meet you or reveal itself as incompatible with who you're becoming. Either outcome is liberation. Either outcome is success. Either outcome is better than the slow death of living without self-respect in a marriage that feels like a cage. The willingness to lose her isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of freedom. And freedom is the only foundation on which real love can be built. Now, go reclaim your life.